Okay, hello and welcome back, and we are back in the usual room. I'm just going to move that microphone. The camera angle's a bit weird today, so I changed the angle because it's like really hot in here. Usually I'd be facing this way and you can see like the closed curtain and things, but it's so hot today for September. It's like I had like a sweater on this morning. I had like tights on. I was all ready for like autumn and September, and then I was just absolutely boiling. Lower myself on this chair, so I had to change, which was very sad because I was very disappointed. I was so ready for autumn. I always have to fiddle with the microphone a bit. I hope that works. You can probably hear outside as well. I do have the window open, but it just literally is not feasible to have it open without a fan on or something. So if a car goes past, I'll just pause and edit it out and it'll be fine. Because it is the middle of the day on a Monday and like no one's home right now, I should be okay. So I thought for today's video, I have already done this video and some things, but I thought I'd update it, and I have a lot more to talk about this time. So I thought I'm just gonna go over some like books that I've read that I really enjoyed. I've got like a stack of them, so I guess I'm gonna start with this one's like a trilogy, so I'm gonna do it all as one basically. But this came out in 2022, this came out in 2023 I think, and this came out this year, so it was like one every year basically. I have talked about this book on my channel before, but the new one came out and I just like loved it even more. It's like the page design is so cool. Fun thing about this first edition of it was this was like the author's first book, and it is signed. I met her and she signed the book, and she was really nice as well. And she complimented my hair, which as of right now I am aware looks kind of crazy, but it's fine. It was curly and really nice this morning, but over the day it has just gotten crazy and no amount of brushing seems to help, so it's just gonna have to be crazy. But it's got this really pretty page design. And it's so cool because like it has songs that the author wrote for it as well, which are actually like available online. It was a strange like series in a good way. It was strange because all of the language used in it was really light-hearted and kind of fun and jokey, but a lot of the material actually isn't as sort of fun and jokey. Like one of the characters has an eating disorder. The main character, like her little brother died and her like family's dealing with the grief of that, and like there's themes of like racism and homophobia, and like a character's mum has a mental illness, and I thought it made for a good contrast. I think I really like this, like, I don't know what you call it, this like page design it has. I really like that. So sorry, the angle's changed because I just shut the window because it's a bit noisy outside, but yeah, it was really good. I read this one a while ago actually, and then she released a sequel. Which this was also really good. I definitely think the last one was my favourite, but I love this design with like the pink and the blue. I think this one was so good, and I really love this like continuation. I think it's so cute. And then this one, it came out, I think it was literally in June, and I kid you not, this is the fastest I've ever read it. I pre-ordered it, and then it came while I was on holiday, and when I came back for the week of coming back, like what cured my post-holiday depression was being able to read this when I came back. And I love her outfit and her makeup in that. Like it looks so chic. I love it. I love how like it has the same blue eyeliner on all of the things. Like I think that's so cool. But anyway, no, I really loved this third one actually. Like I've never really cried per se over a book until I was reading like the last few chapters of this, because like the main character starts to have like panic attacks and things, and I've kind of dealt with that myself a bit, and seeing it written in the way that the author wrote it was so sort of accurate it was one of the most accurate ways I've seen it like written or portrayed sort of in media, which was a really nice thing to sort of read. It like related to it quite on a more personal level, so it was real good. It was really good to see that. But I really liked it. So the next one, I read this one back in last year, and I had it since 2021, and I was kind of picking it up, putting it down, being like, I don't know. The first few chapters were kind of slow to get into things, but like when you get into things, it gets into things. This was back when Book Talk per se was actually a pretty decent place to find books. Now it's just we're not even gonna go into what it is now, because it was an interesting place to be before it got weird. But this was pretty good as well. I think Ali Hazelwood is a bit of a polarizing writer, because I know it's a lot of that sort of what people perceive as like lowbrow romance, but it's just like people hate on whatever women, especially young women, are interested in. Like, if it gets someone reading and interested in books, then it gets someone reading. Who cares how good it is? In my opinion, at least. That does not extend to Colleen Hoover. That's a no-no. We're not even going to talk about that. That's a no-no. So that was pretty good, I have to say. I did like how it sort of like flip-flops sort of back and forth, and how like on and off it is. It's very sort of will they, won't they towards the end, so it makes that payoff at the end even better, like when it actually comes to it. I'd say I'm not a huge fan of sort of romancy things. Definitely young adult is pretty good, because like this series, for example, had like an element of romance. It was mainly romance based, but it wasn't the whole plot line. There were subplot lines, and there were other things that were focused on, and there were other themes that were explored really well. I'm not a huge fan of full-on romance, because I just think it can get a little bit repetitive. I kind of like the style of, this leads me on to the next one actually, the style of book that's written about like this absolute gem. This is a classic. Susanna Kaysen, I believe her name is Kaysen. Yeah, that's it. Susanna Kaysen's Girl Interrupted. The way that this book sort of doesn't have a general narrative. A lot of people like watch the movie and think, oh, she runs away, you know, with Daisy and all of that happens, but they in the book that didn't happen. That's why I was so glad I read this first, because in the movie, obviously, you can't really do a movie that's just like flip-flopping around. It'd get confusing. So they had to obviously make up that plot line, which I think worked. The movie was really good. It managed to fit all of these scenes from the book into like a tangible plot line, which was quite impressive, so I really liked it. And Winona Ryder and Angelina Jolie were really, really good. But I like the way it sort of is just a load of these different stories that tell one big story, which is obviously Susanna Kaysen's time at McLean Hospital in the 1960s. But the fact that everything in this book is like true, this was something that like really happened to Susanna. I really enjoyed reading that. What I'm reading at the moment actually is sort of takes the same narrative structure. This one has more of a built-up plot line, obviously, because it is fiction. It's my year of rest and relaxation. One of the things I didn't expect, I heard of this one, I heard people online talking about it, and I was like, sounds interesting, you know, if I liked Girl Interrupted, I'll probably like this. So I started reading it, and like, the tone of this thing is like, I'm just gonna adjust my chair. The tone will be like, she'll be talking about like, say like her job at the museum, and then she would just tell one of the most like unhinged, kind of crazy, so they're not really disturbing, but some of them can be quite strange, sort of out of literally nowhere. Like the book will just be normally talking about like her childhood or her job at the art museum, and she just will say something like or describe how she did something that's just like, oh my god. Like, if anyone's read it and they remember the scene where like she gets fired from her job at the museum and what she did after that, I was reading it out loud to my mum in the car once, and I was like, I can't read this out loud. But I think that's really kept me going on it, because like a book that has no like real narrative other than, oh, this girl wants to sleep for a full year to try and like uproot her life, it could sound a bit boring, but because it's got her telling, like in between talking about, oh, on this day I slept for this long and I'm on this sort of sleeping pill or whatever, in between her talking about that, she's telling these like stories, and they're not like normal stories of like, oh, on that day we did that. It's like these crazy kind of experiences she went through that led her to the decision. I think that sort of rambling It's really, like, I love that kind of thing. Like, that's the kind of things I want to write. So, The Virgin's Absolute, I think I read this back in June. I read it while I was in Greece, and I read it in about 4 days. That is the quickest I've ever read any book. And the thing with me is, I'm really fussy when it comes to books. If I like a book, like really like a book, I will not be able to put it down. But if I don't as much, it takes me a little longer to get through it. So I think it helped that I was away and I only had a couple of books with me, but I had The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, which I haven't read yet. I read a bit of it, but I haven't read it all yet. It's quite a short one, so I should finish it soon, actually. I had The Bell Jar, I had this, like, biography about Taylor Swift that I bought at the airport, and I think I had another one. I think it was this one I had with me as well, because I bought them, 3 of them at the same time. I have this cover as well, but this one, it has a plot line, obviously, about, you know, why the sisters did what they did and trying to find that out and what their lives were like, but it jumps back and forth between time, and it jumps through the story, which I really like. I found it's quite a, like, it was quite a, like, I don't know how to explain it. It was really interesting in the way that it explored when someone does that kind of thing. I don't really want to say it, but when someone does that kind of thing, once, like, that person is no longer there, you can't really ask them, why did you do it? So it's, like, kind of trying to figure that out, trying to get behind it, especially when you didn't really know that person when they were around, I think, and trying to, like, examine all this evidence and figure out why. It's, like, a really interesting point of view to take on that kind of thing, which I found really interesting to read, and I found especially it taking place, I thought it was the 1950s for some reason when I read it, because he was talking about his parents in the war, and I was like, oh, World War II. It's the 1970s when I watched the movie. That was another really good movie adaptation. Sofia Coppola, people pronounce it differently, did such a good job on that. Like, she got it just right. Like, I'm usually really fussy when it comes to movie to screen adaptations, but Girl Interrupted, and that one was really, really good. They got it just right. It was so good. So, speaking of screen, this one hasn't actually been adapted, but it's attached to another series. I think this came before Heartstopper, or around the times of Heartstopper, but it follows, if you've ever read or watched Heartstopper, it follows Charlie Sprague's sister, Tori Sprague, and Tori's like this very sort of angsty teenager. She's suffering from some kind of undisclosed mental health issue, and, like, there's this guy who likes her at her school who starts pulling all these pranks and stuff to try and impress her, and she's not impressed by it, and it was so interesting to read because she's, like, suffering through some kind of depression, some kind of mental health issue, and there's this really bleak discussion. I'm not gonna discuss it, like, on here, not gonna ruin it, but at the end there's this, that, like, the school burns down and they're, like, stood on the roof, and they have this really gripping discussion, and it's, like, it's stuff you don't really hear written about, quite bleak, quite sort of, and it was really well written, to the point it wasn't, you know, there's, like, a line that's easy to blur between, like, representation of mental health issues and glamorization. I think, say something like Euphoria was quite in that blurred line of sort of glamorization and representation of, you know, addiction and mental health issues. I'm not going to go into what I think about that because I didn't watch it in the end, but it's a bit too much for me. But I think books like this are definitely, I think because they're often based on real life experiences or much more researched sort of things. You've got a lot more time to sort of research and edit when you're coming up with a book than you do a movie or a TV show. It's quite good. So I was really, especially when it came to some of the things she would account or she would say, she's around my age, British teenager. It was, I think, one of the best sort of representations of what that's like for someone who's less sociable or doesn't really have the best mental health, or what that sort of looks like for a person like that. I think it's one of the best sort of accounts, not really accounts, but it's one of the best stories about that kind of life. I would really love for it to be adapted to screen, because obviously Alice Osman with Heartstopper's success has her foot in the door for that. And I think if they were going to do a movie for Heartstopper, it should be Solitaire, because people had a really good response to Tori in the series, because she does show up in the series a few times, and even that small role, I think people really responded quite well to it. So I think, you know, Nick and Charlie and a lot of the popular characters do feature in Solitaire, so I think it would make a really good, if they were going to do a movie for Heartstopper, it would either have to be based on the book that's attached to Heartstopper, which is called Nick and Charlie. I think it could be a really good, either that one, which I haven't read actually, I do want to get. I haven't actually finished the Heartstopper comics. I need to, they're quite expensive books to buy because they're so big and they're quite popular. So I wait a little while after each one comes out. I still haven't finished the second season yet, and I think from the interview that just came out about Heartstopper, the third season's going to be a lot darker, which I think would be a really good place to take the series, because I think a lot of people are kind of getting, not necessarily sick, but that kind of bright, happy, you know, there's a point where people are like, oh, we want something with a little bit more material. So I personally like the brighter and happy tone. You don't really find sort of media about like gay people that is all just, you know, happy romance like you do in the same way about straight people. I don't want any morality discussions in the comments. If you even start that, you're out the door. I don't take that stuff lightly. You're out the door. Don't even try it. Anyways, on a lighter, well, these books aren't exactly, this one's not too bad. This is Truth or Dare by Sophie Mackenzie. It took me a little while to come around on this one, because on the same day I was at a book festival, on the same day I met the author of the first book I showed, but she wasn't there. I don't think we went to see her talk in the end, but I was torn on whether to get her book or not. No, I think we did go to her talk, I remember now, because I was torn. I was like, oh, it sounds like a good book, but I was torn on whether to get it. And I ended up getting it in the end, and I read it after I read that, and actually once I started reading it, couldn't put it down. It's quite short, so it didn't take me that long, but it was, the ending of it was absolutely gripping. It's about this girl who, she's working in like a factory, her grandma's factory for the summer, and there's these eco-protesters that are like, because they're actually quite bad for the environment, and there's these eco-protesters outside, and she meets one of them, and she's got a bit of a like crush on him, so she lies about not like being connected to the factory. But then when they plan like this sort of, not necessarily attack, but the factory ends up getting lit on fire somehow. I don't really remember how, I read this a while ago, but all these like lies that she tells to everyone, she gets really tangled up, and she has to tell him, oh, I'm actually this guy's granddaughter, this woman's granddaughter of the factory that you guys are protesting against. And she uncovers that her grands lied about like being all eco-friendly, and it's this whole sort of entanglement for something that was aimed at young adults. It was really topical, and I thought it was really good, sort of how it managed to handle more like, not necessarily dark, but more dramatic narratives in a way that was still like light and still not too heavy. The next one is a little bit more heavy, but this is Reputation by Sarah. I'm just going to let you read that because I can't pronounce that for the life of me, but I found this in a charity shop, and it's about this member of parliament, this British politician, and she gets like, she's like a feminist politician, she gets loads of like stick online for it, and she gets this like this really quite progressive law through, and this journalist she does interviews with, they go out for dinner, and she ends up rejecting him, and he starts to like dig into her personal life and find out about this trouble her daughter's been in with the police, and he starts to like stalk her, and eventually it leads to him getting into her house, and we don't find out whether she actually kills him or not, or whether like, he fell down the stairs, or whether she pushed him down the stairs was the whole thing, but she ends up going to court anyways, and it's this whole thing of, are they going to find her guilty? Is she innocent? Did she do it? Did she not? And there's this whole thing. It's really good. It had me, again, it took me a while to get into, because the beginning's quite slow, but when you get into the actual thick of it, and the actual like court like part of it was really good. But that's about all of them I think I've read in recent times that I would like recommend. I don't honestly, it may seem like a lot, but this is since about 2022 sort of thing. This is what I've read in about a good 2 years. So for some people this will be so much longer, but I think with me, like, I go in and out of phases of reading. I'll like read loads for a few months and then I won't for another few. It all depends on, because I write a lot. I want to be an author. That's what I want to do eventually. I want to like have a couple of books out, stuff. I write a lot, and if I'm reading a lot I won't be writing. I'll probably be getting like ideas for my own stories and my own poetry and stuff. And then if I'm not writing, I'll be if I'm like writing, I won't be reading. If I'm reading, I won't be writing, vice versa. It goes in like a thing. But anyways, so that was that. I'm aware some of these are quite like heavy topics, but they were all really good reads. The one thing I will be aware of is if you're like sensitive to mental health issues and things like that, I wouldn't really recommend reading things like, you know, things like Girl Interrupted or The Virgin. I don't know if YouTube's gonna... I'm not up for pay, so I don't really think I can be flagged, so should be alright, but I'm not saying anything bad. But no, I wouldn't really recommend those just because they've got quite, not necessarily accurate depictions, but it's talked about quite bluntly in both Girl Interrupted and this one. Solitaire's a lot more tentative about issues like that because it does cover them, but because obviously it's about teenagers and stuff, it's a lot sort of more, it's aimed at teenagers as well. So obviously the writer is, that's one of the things I find really good about Solitaire, is it was much lighter than, say, the way Girl Interrupted. The thing is, Girl Interrupted somebody's real account of that kind of stuff, so obviously it's going to be a little bit more blunt, and you know, that one stands to make a point about that kind of stuff, so obviously it's going to be a lot more blunt. But I think I wouldn't go into those books blindly. I would just be aware that it is going to talk about that. I think I didn't go into it not expecting it to talk about that, because I'd heard of both of these through Tumblr and everyone was quite sort of flat out about what it mentioned, so long as you don't go into it thinking it's going to be some light-hearted story, it's really not that bad. There are, I think, much more bleak depictions and sort of books about that stuff out there, but just that they were really good though, I have to say. Like Girl Interrupted, it was really short, but I read it in like 5 days, and oh my god, some of the like accounts were just crazy, and I kept remembering this was someone's real life. Like, this was not just Susanna's real life, this was, you know, every person in that book was real. All those people's stories were real, that those things happened. I just kept like thinking about that throughout the whole thing. I was like, oh my god, that was like a real person. Especially like during the 1960s when they didn't have such a great understanding of issues like that. It was really interesting. Anyways, I'm done blabbering on. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I think I might make more of these sort of just unplanned blabbing things. I like that. Anyways,